Good morning, Gabriel. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning to discuss some of the implications of fintech and the digitalization in finance for the insurance sector. I know IOPA has been very, very active in that area. In fact, so many of the issues were at the forefront of the work of the ESAs on some of these technology issues. And it's great hearing from you your thinking around some of these issues. Maybe to start with, how do you see the importance of the digitalization having developed during your time as chair of IOPA?
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation to be present again in this Afore event. It's always a pleasure to cooperate in this area. I think that IOPA has been very, as you said, very active in this area because we see this digital transformation being one of the fundamental elements going forward, and already also in the present of the insurance sector. And it is very important that we develop a good balance between ensuring the high level of consumer protection and the stability of the markets, but also that we all need to embrace innovation. And so we believe that regulation and supervision can be a good catalyst to maintain this good balance. And that's why, of course, IOPA has been very active in this area and will continue in the coming years for sure.
And how do you think COVID is impacting things? I know we've looked at this in payments and other areas, but also in the insurance sector. How do you see the link between digitalization and the rise of COVID?
Well, the emergence of the COVID pandemic really pushed insurers and insurance intermediaries to really shift to digital interaction. And I would say that the sector benefited from the investments in technology that have been made already for a number of years. And we see now with COVID-19 clear signs of adoption and I would say also acceleration of the digital transformation in areas like distribution, like advice, like claims management. There's really a greater adoption of digital tools for claims processing, for example, an improved and increased handling of web, smartphone, tools in interfaces, and we also see an interesting thing, which is we see really the budget of IT-related elements in the sector starting to shift away from investments more in core applications towards investments more on big data analytics, artificial intelligence. And this will have, and it starts to have really an important, I would say, implication and big effects in terms of product design.
And in those developments, which I think will bring a lot of benefits to the consumer in the medium term, but from your perspective of IOPA, you of course, by nature, more focused on some of the risks and some of the regulatory implications that come from this. And how have you approached this? What do you see as some of the challenges that you might have to deal with as a supervisor in this area?
Well, there are of course a number of challenges. I would say the first challenge is the need for supervisors also to have access to different types of skills in terms of the workforce. So a new skill set is needed also in terms of supervision, both from a regulatory but also from a supervisory perspective. As we see, of course, these tools being more and more used and being more and more central in the business models of insurers, supervisors need, of course, also to adapt. So that's one angle which I think is very important. Then the other element, of course, is related to the cyber element, and we have seen that during the crisis, where all of us, which of course the working from home situation, we've seen a tremendous increase of cyber attacks and tentatives and fraud related to that. And of course, insurers are also very much relevant because they have a lot of data from individuals, of course, and so the resilience of the insurance sector towards these cyber attacks, but also the possibilities of the insurance sector to increase the resilience of the companies and the individuals out there in our economy, the resilience towards cyber attacks and the protection towards those cyber attacks, the cyber IGN that needs to be increased. All of this is also very important also for the business of insurers, there as providers, of course. The third angle, I think it's very important in terms of risks of digitalization, and more specifically on the consumer side. I think it's making sure that this movement to embrace innovation is also done within a balanced way, as I mentioned before, and very important, and I would say crucial for this element of trust and confidence that all of us as consumers need to have in this digital age is the use of data. Data needs to be used in a fair way, in an ethical way, in a transparent way, and I think that these are very much important elements throughout the digital transformation of our economy, but I would say very much particularly in insurance. Insurance is a business where you need to have trust, you need to have confidence that your really own personal data is used in an appropriate way, and there is a transparent and ethical process surrounding it. So that's why EIOPA already some months ago created an expert group on digital ethics in insurance in order to help us to set up some high-level principles to ensure good consumer outcomes in this area. And there are three main aspects that are being looked upon by this group. The first one, it's about fairness and discrimination. We need to have a good high-level standards to deal with the data biases, and also to deal with the kind of frontier between price optimization and price discrimination. There needs to be, of course, sound high-level principles in this area. The second point, it's about transparency and explainability. You need to know how data is used and for what in a transparent way, and how the data is used to take decisions. And this needs to be explainable. It cannot be a black box. You will not have trust and confidence by consumers in this evolution if there is no explanation, self-evident explanation from why the premiums in this risk are different from that risk and this person and that person. It needs to be explainable. So that is very important. And thirdly, third area, it's about governance. And we need to ensure that there is accountability, that there is security, that there is resilience of the usage of data. And we need to put this within the risk management framework and the governance framework of insurers. So these three main areas are the ones that are being looked upon by this group. And I'm really looking forward, in the coming months to have the possibility to come out with some high-level principles in relation to this fairness, ethical, and transparent use of data, because we believe also that this will be playing an important role in terms of avoiding the risks of exclusion from certain consumers out there in the digital transformation in the insurance sector.
I think you raise a really important point there, Gabriel, which is, insurance is based on solidarity, collective solidarity. And the more we move down this technology angle, yes, risk management can become much more sophisticated. But finding the right balance there between the consumer interest and effective risk management, I think is a key point. You also raised these things about claims handling and other applications like call centers and so on, where technology plays more and more of a role. How do we ensure as part of this work that the consumer isn't left behind, that it is really for the benefit of the consumer and doesn't create the perception that it is optimizing the insurance process?
Well, that's the key question. That's the key question, I would say, and this is, I think, something where we need to really work all of us together, regulators, the industry, and industry being, of course, the incumbents, but also the newcomers and the disruptors, consumers and consumer associations, academia, and all the services around. I would say that, there's no silver bullet in here. There's no magical solution that you can by law say that this is going to be the outcome. No, I think these are new areas we are all, of course, discovering. We are all trying to adapt to understand how we can do it better. So I really believe that there is a fundamental element in here of cooperation between these different stakeholders. And then regulation will of course come, but regulation should not also stifle innovation. So we need to have a proper balance when we should regulate when we really understand fully things, and then we have a clear path towards having this balance out there. That's the approach that we have been following at EIOPA. Really a lot about opening discussions, having contributions, and also creating high-level principles. And there's a lot that I would say in this area that will probably come first, with some overall guidance, overall high-level principles, and then to see, of course, how the things evolve in the market and how consumers can be better protected. But let's not fool ourselves. This is the future. All this digital transformation brings a lot of opportunities for reducing costs, for being more efficient, to have better products and better services to consumers. We really need to find a way to get the balance right, and I think that that's going to be the task, I think, for the coming years. On the other side, I think supervision is also a key element. I really believe that this is an area, as in many others probably, and my views from the past also on this. I think that probably we put too much focus on regulating and too less focus on supervising it. So I hope that in this area, as it is a new area also, we can find an approach where we have sound high-level principles regulation, and then to have the capacity to supervise and to really enforce the rules that exist to protect the consumers, instead of developing a huge length of regulation that will make things impossible, basically, also for consumers to get the benefit out of digital transformation.
Thank you, Gabriel. As you know, that's really the core theme of our conference, is always to think through where is regulation required, what can be done through self-regulation or through supervisory tools or best practices or competition instruments, but not necessarily only through regulation. It plays an important role, but I agree with you, it could potentially stifle development. And also, I don't always know whether new technology requires a change to regulation, because a lot of the underlying principles remain the same. So just because you're doing it by new means doesn't mean you still have to meet the normal consumer protection or any other prudential requirements or conduct requirements. Maybe taking this then to a point where I think EIOPA really was at the forefront was around operational resilience and dealing with third parties, be it cloud operators or other third-party providers. Now, of course, we've got the DORA proposal on the table, and the other ESAs have followed suit with their guidelines, but you were first. And it'd be interesting to hear, why were you first? Is it just because you divided up the functions between the different ESAs, or do you see there was a particular need in the insurance sector? And how do you view the relationship between your core supervised entities, the insurance industry, and the use of those third-party providers?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that the way that we look at insurance regulation, insurance supervision, it's mainly focused on risks. And so we ask companies and we ask insurers, of course, to have in their own process, in their own risk management process, this clear identification of all the risks that they see out there. And then as supervisors, it's one of the fundamental rules of the supervisor, look, of course, at capital, solvency, liquidity, all of that. But more than that, that's what Solvency II brought in, was this extra look for risk and the way that the risk is managed in a forward-looking perspective. So maybe because of that, I think since early stages already some years ago, we were starting really to be much more focused on these IT cloud risks, because we saw, of course, this movement in the insurance sector, definitely, to more and more use of third-party providers, and the digital transformation means, of course, also more outsourcing, more use of third-party providers. And we started to see that as a fundamental element in the risk management process, and of course in the resilience of the insurance business. When you look, for example, at risk assessments from the big main insurers, already for some years we see definitely a more focus and concern on outsourcing activities, because very often it's from this outsourcing and then sub-outsourcing activities that some risks, and cyber risks, for example, are brought in to the ecosystem of the way that insurer manage their business. So I think maybe this was one of the reasons why we were quite alerted already since the beginning on this. As I said, of course, the use of the cloud, the use of third-party providers, it's a fundamental element in this process of digital transformation. And more also looking at modeling providers, other data providers, not only the cloud services, but also when we see all the business developed around cyber, this comes also a lot from data from third-party providers. When we see developing of new business looking at social media data, this comes also from third-party providers. When you have the developments in relation to new environmental climate change risks, natural catastrophes, this comes from third-party providers, this comes from third-party modeling. So I would say that in insurance business, there is a lot of, I would say, use of these third-party providers. So the impact and the relevance of these providers is definitely increasing. And so I think it is, in that context, it is very important, of course, to ensure the resilience of the insurers themselves, but also the resilience of these third-party providers and the way that they interact with insurers. That was the logic that we had on having these guidelines on IT security and governance, and also these guidelines on the cloud side. But when we look at the reality, we are of course imposing some requirements on insurers. This is only dealing in an indirect way, I would say, also with the risks. We believe that there should be some requirements and some oversight on the critical third-party providers. That will be a more direct way to dealing with these issues, and that's why we support the way that the Commission is doing this from an high-level perspective, having the DORA framework being now to be discussed. And we believe that this is the right step to have some more requirements and oversight over these third-party, critical third-party providers.
Thank you, Gabriel. Maybe I can break this down into two follow-up questions, one related to the insurance companies and one to this new category of third-party providers. On the insurance side, you already have a lot of requirements built into the ORSA framework coming out of Solvency II and so on. To what extent do you see this as complementary to the new requirements of DORA? DORA is much, from my perspective, quite prescriptive, and by the time we've done level 2 and level 3, it will become very prescriptive. Do you think DORA will replace some of those requirements that are already imposed through the prudential framework, or does it supplement it? How do you see that relationship? Because as you know, there's some concerning in the industry as to the level of requirements that might be imposed.
Well, I think, first of all, I think that there was a need to have a kind of an umbrella regulatory framework for this area, because we have been seeing, of course, along the years, developments both in the banking framework, in the insurance framework, in the securities framework, which somehow is aligned also because, of course, we work all together and there is some consistency, of course, throughout the financial sector in this. But I think that the relevance, of course, of the digitalization and the digital transformation requires, I think, something a little bit above in terms of having the main, I would say, concerns from a systemic perspective, from a security perspective, from a resilience perspective in the sectors being dealt with in a consistent umbrella regulatory framework. So that, I think, it makes sense. Now, what we need to ensure is, of course, that this kind of umbrella regulatory framework coming with the DORA doesn't conflict then also, and that there's no conflict then on the specificities of the Solvency II requirements, the guidelines that are in place. So at the end, I believe that what we will end up having is different levels, some with more high-level principles, others with a little bit more detail, more focused on the specificities of each of the business, more probably in terms of guidelines and guiding principles on how to apply the main framework. And these will need to be, of course, consistent throughout the three sectors. But I think that's the basis that we have been working also with our colleagues from the EBA and ESMA. I think we have been being quite consistent in the approaches that we have been having. I wouldn't say that that DORA will substitute all of these elements that we have in the more insurance-specific regulatory framework, but there will be probably the need to have some adaptations in order to have a consistent, I would say, a consistent framework at the end, not only at the top, but also at the different elements that we have then in the insurance regulation. There will be some work to do in this area in the coming years.
Thank you. And if we now look at the critical third-party providers, this new category, obviously, if the proposal is adopted in its current form, of course, it's going through co-legislative processes and might see some changes. But as foreseen at the moment, would foresee a designation process for such providers and then an oversight framework for such providers, both giving EIOPA a significant role for where those third-party providers are predominantly used in the insurance sector. How do you, I mean, it's too early to say, but certainly given your experience, how do you see that designation process work from the insurance side? Do you have certain expectations as to the type of providers that might be caught by this? And then when it comes to the actual oversight framework, one of the feedback we get from the industries, how the dialogue, how the cooperation between the overseer and the individual companies might work. Yeah. It's not a supervisory framework, but still there should be an ongoing dialogue.
Yeah. No, that's of course a critical, important question. And as you said, the proposal is still under discussion. There will be, for sure, as always, some adjustments. We are positive to this, as I said, but I think we need to ensure a number of elements going forward. First, we need to ensure that we have clarity. What is the role and what are the powers and the tasks of this oversight? This is something which is different from a supervision, financial supervision of players in the market. So I think it needs to be clear that this oversight over these critical third providers should be focused on the service that they provide to the companies that we have, in this case, in the insurance sector, and not on on everything that they do beyond that service. So this, I think, this focus on the oversight mandate, I think it's very important. Secondly, I think we need to find a way to have an efficient and an effective process in here. And as I said, I welcome the initiative from the Commission, but I also believe that there are possibilities, to improve a little bit the way that this designation and then the oversight is done, who leads this oversight, how this works. Because of course, most of these third-party critical providers, they are critical for all the three sectors. And so I think it's very important that we find the most streamlined, the most efficient and effective process of dealing with this oversight, not only in terms of the powers, but also in terms of the governance that surrounds it. And to be honest, I believe that this can be improved in terms of what was proposed, I think, and I hope that the discussion will move in that direction, and we will have some ideas on how to improve that, focused on efficiency and effectiveness. Third point, looking at specifically on the insurance sector, of course, as I mentioned, insurance by definition is an activity that depends heavily on data. So everything that deals with the provision of data it is critical for insurance. And so I think that if you look at the insurance sector, not only, of course, cloud providers are becoming critical in the business model, but as I mentioned, providers of information and modeling on natural catastrophes, on cyber risks, those are, I would say, areas that are becoming really relevant for the business model of insurance, and so that should be covered by this third-party critical providers regulation.
No, thank you. I think big question will be when does such service become critical? But
Yeah.
So who will be caught and who won't? But I think in the interest of time, I would like to move to a third area, and in a way maybe the most exciting, because I think it's the most innovative, which is the consultation you just launched last week on open insurance. Having worked in the Payment Services Directive, I know the subject and the concept really well from that perspective, but it's now interesting to see it being taken up by you in the insurance sector. So maybe what was the driver behind that? Why the timing now to start in insurance looking at this, Gabriel?
Well, I think this is a normal evolution. As you said, we've seen this development of open ecosystems of data in the payment services some years ago. We've seen this right now as really a reality and bringing a lot of innovation and new products and I would say benefits also to consumers. So I think it's our duty also to look at these realities and to see, how and to what extent this can be used also in other parts of the financial sector. And so that's the approach that EIOPA has been taken. The question that we launched with this discussion paper, and it's really a discussion paper. There's a lot of questions there. It's opening to, of course, getting feedback. But the big question is whether and how far the insurance value chain should be opened up, and whether and how the insurance related data should be shared in order to to have more innovation in products and services, and we want to get the perspectives from all the stakeholders. We want to get the perspectives from the incumbents, the perspectives from the innovators, the perspectives from consumers, from academics. I think this is really at the core of what insurance can also be in the future. If you think a little bit about this process of digitalization, the use of big data, artificial intelligence tools, and then you combine it with the Internet of Things, the potential wealth of data that is going to be there to be used, and hopefully, of course, to be used for the best purposes, to provide good services, to provide good products to consumers, it's huge. So the possibilities to develop these new open ecosystems in the insurance sector are there. We see already some movements in that direction. And so what we want is to really start this reflection on this opportunity, to better understand the benefits, to understand also the risks. You see that we focus on benefits for the consumers, benefits for the industry, but also risks for the consumers, risks for the industry. And overall, what we want is to contribute to this reflection. And as I said before, to move ahead in the direction of a sound adoption of digital transformation in the sector for the benefit of all of us as consumers.
And how do you feel, because I think ultimately what open finance, or in this case open insurance, will lead to is potentially more disintermediation. The ability to switch, for consumer to switch more effectively, which isn't maybe a bad thing. Maybe in time even switch cross borders, which would be quite innovative in the single market in financial services. So I see those benefits, but it does come with disintermediation. That means the relationship between the product developer, applying the product oversight and governance concepts and so on, and the actual customer will become more remote. And with it, things like advice, which is based on the specific needs of a customer, becomes more remote. So how do you balance those two kind of desires of more competition, more access, more openness, but still with this need to ultimately have an understanding of the end user, the end customer?
Yes, that is of course the challenge, and that's why we have in this discussion paper we focus also a lot on the benefits and the risks for consumers and for the industry. Again, I think that there's no silver bullet on this. What I believe is going to be the future for sure is that you will have a different type of intermediation. Intermediation will become less front to front personal contact. It will become more on demand. It will become more when you have your smartphone and you're reading the type of elements of new products and services in a app, you will probably have the opportunities to get human interaction during that journey, but not all of the time. You will have probably the possibility to share your own data in a way that you're not sharing it just with one provider. You're sharing it in a way that products and services can be generated from that. But I'm also a big believer on the human element. I think that we will not see, at least for many products in the insurance sector, full disintermediation. But let's be honest, there are products and services in the insurance sector that can be fully disintermediated, and I think the advent of smart contracts, the use of blockchains and all these new technology that can foster these developments is there, and there are huge opportunities on this. So I think we need to really open these questions, open this reflection, and build a regulatory framework that again creates the possibilities of embracing and tackling these opportunities in time, but at the same time to build it with confidence towards consumers. So it's a challenge for sure, but it's a very interesting challenge. Huh?
Yes, and thank you. We've got a very interesting panel on that tomorrow, the role of smart contracts, programmable money, and
Yes.
its impact on the industrialization and back on financial services supporting that. So it fits nicely into this. Maybe I could just finish on one question, Gabriel, linked to this, though. And that is around consumer protection, because I guess with open insurance, the question around consumer protection becomes even more important. The question about a
Yes.
consumer needs to understand the choice and needs to understand these things. And we've had this debate in PRIPS. I know you're dealing with that. It's not today the day to discuss PRIPS, but you deal with this in other areas. So how do we then square the circle that the consumer has sufficient basic information to make choices?
Actually, I think that is a fundamental element, what you're mentioning. And I think that the use of digital tools will help a lot in that. And I think we need to change the paradigm also on our regulatory side, on the information and the disclosure towards consumers. And I really hope that in this reflection that the Commission just opened on looking at PRIPS and IDD and MiFID in the coming years and all these disclosure related issues, I really hope that we have in here not an incremental, I would say an incremental change, but really a new paradigm emerging, and that new paradigm needs to come with digital. Digital tools will allow us to get a completely different type of approach towards consumers, to be really focused, to really giving the opportunity for people to have layered information, so that you will have in your possession what is fundamental, probably more and more with labeling, not with huge descriptions, but with labeling. And then if you want to have, of course, more and more information, you will have access to it just with pop-ups, and that is much easier to do with digital tools than, of course, with paper as we have it. So I think that this should be part of this transformation also, and giving consumers a good understanding of how their data is also used within this new ecosystem. I think it's part of the evolution for sure. But let's be honest also, we are living, I believe, one of the biggest transformations in our life. All this digital transformation, it's really changing our society. And I would say that in the next 10, 15 years, it will be a huge, a huge change. Well, that's at least what I see. I think that insurance has a huge potential to offer new products, new services to consumers in this digital world, but it needs to be done with the trust and the confidence of consumers. So this is the challenge, I think, for the whole providers and for the new providers. Every step of your business model, every step of the products that you're launching, of the services that you're putting out there, needs to be checked against transparency, against ethical usage of data. And this, I think, it's very important. So this is the future. The future, I think it's bright. It brings a lot of opportunities, but the future is there to be built up, today by all of us. And we have a huge, I think, responsibility, but also I think a huge opportunity in the coming years to be part of this exciting transformation of our societies.
Gabriel, thank you so much indeed. I think the fact that we're doing this in a virtual environment in itself shows the kind of transformation. It would be nice to have had you here in person. You made the point about supervisors having to adapt to the new technologies and the new approaches, and you've laid out how that is the case. But I think if your and IOPA's vision is anything to go by, I think we're kind of in good hands. Thank you so much indeed for being with us, and hopefully see you next year, maybe in a different capacity, but you'll still be welcome next year. Thank you so much, Gabriel, and speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and have a good conference.
Thank you so much.